Hollywood is undeniably in crisis. After years of back-to-back blows, the COVID shutdowns, the historic strikes that followed, and the flight of talent and projects to cheaper, more agile markets, the industry in LA is on its knees. Studios are reeling and crews are unemployed, but crucially, so are the restaurants and delis and local businesses that rely on those crews. And as Hollywood struggles to recover, it also has to fight a war on all sides. Streamers like Netflix and YouTube are beating legacy studios at their own game, vying for attention and winning. Tech giants like Apple and Amazon have also muscled into the content business, dropping huge sums of money without caring at all whether their media earns it back, which is a game the legacy studios just can't play. And now the threat of AI just became existential. Just this week, Google released VO3, a model capable of generating video and dialogue and diegetic sound from a single prompt, raising real fears about the future of human-led production. Production overall in LA is down by about 40% in the last 2 years. So all of this brings up a few questions. Will Hollywood survive? If it does, who's it surviving for? Is LA turning into Detroit? The parallels are more than unsettling. In the 80s and 90s, Detroit collapsed under the weight of bureaucratic bloat, an over-reliance on a single industry, and the globalization of skilled labor. So is history repeating itself? To help us unpack that, I'm joined by Pamala Buzick Kim, co-founder of Stay in LA, an advocacy group working to cut red tape, modernize tax incentives, and make LA a film-friendly city again. But this isn't just policy work. For Pamala, it's personal. It's about saving not just an industry, but a workforce, a cultural identity, and a way of life that built communities across LA for generations. In this episode, we discuss why productions are fleeing California and what it's going to take to bring them back, how outdated permitting and incentive systems are stalling recovery, and why the fight for Hollywood is really a fight for jobs, culture, and economic dignity. LA was once the dream factory of the world, but dreams don't survive on nostalgia. They need policy, they need pressure, and they need people willing to fight. If LA can't fix this, the world's not waiting around. Pamala shows us what it looks like to fight for relevance and fight for survival. I hope you enjoy this episode. But it's good to see you. I was going to say that, I'm glad you put in how to pronounce your name because I was like, Pamala, but in my mind, I always go first to Pami.
Pummy, I know. Pummy, oh, Pummy. Just so everyone knows, my mother is Korean and English is her second language. And the only reason why I'm named Kamala is because she couldn't pronounce Pamela. But now that she's been in the States for over 50 years, she's always like, oh, Pummy, what you do? Why you not on TV? And I always, have to explain. I'm like, I'm not an actor. She's like, oh, what do I tell my friends then? I'm like, just tell them I'm a doctor. It's fine. Yeah. No one's gonna know.
Yeah, it's certainly better with a Korean mom than saying you're in media or advertising or film and television.
Yeah, in some ways I am a doctor. I'm just a doctor of the heart and community.
Yeah, you're a doctor for the industries.
That's what I'm just gonna put on my taglines now. Doctor of the industries per Orlando.
Yeah. Well, it's true. It's like, I'll actually use that as a jumping off point to kind of summarize, your experience. You were a very kind of successful rep, and, people who don't know what a rep and salesperson in the ad industry is somebody who works with commercial directors, lots of really great commercial directors. You were at Furlined, which, at the time was really doing some of the most industry defining work. And you then started your own business and you were very successful kind of repping lots of directors to advertising agencies and getting them on really big marquee projects. What I find really interesting about the decisions you made then, kind of after that is you took on, what was clearly a
Intentional pivot. I would say an intentional pivot.
It was an intentional pivot, but it was to tackle a real problem in the industry where female directors were not getting put on briefs for advertising. And you started Free the Bid.
Well, I didn't start it. So I'm going to back up a little bit. Yeah. So when I left, being a rep in the business, and really it's just a talent agent, like the same thing you would have for like CAA and, Brad Pitt or Steven Spielberg. So it's the same thing in advertising. And I think one of the things that I learned from that experience was I've always been the bridge. I've always been the bridge between art and commerce. Even, starting at Cal Arts, And having been a stage manager and producer, I've always just worked with creative people my entire life. And so when Camille and I decided to close Maven Label as a talent agency at the time, we went into different directions. And I very purposely went into tech. So I went into immediately pretty much into working, not working with those guys who had created it. And that marketplace was really to try to find talent, like copywriters, art directors for ad agencies and brands that were opening in house and give them a marketplace to find some of the best talent all in one place. It wasn't unlike a Behance, like a portfolio site, but there was some additional features to it to where you could book them and you would know their availability rather than calling everybody and their mother to see if they were available right now. So that was really where I cut my teeth, and also just taken a ton of classes and have always been sort of digitally forward. And I just thought, being a woman in my late 30s at the time, I was like, what's going to last? So to me, I was like, okay, let's get into the .com and all of the things. So I got into that realm, and then after that started consulting for other marketplaces. So marketplaces being where there's a buyer and seller. So like eBay is a marketplace, Uber's technically a marketplace. Working Not Working certainly was. And so I just started moving from there. And from there, I started just working on more and more specific niche marketplaces. And I think that like at some point I was doing women photographers. And so that's sort of how Free the Work found me. They had started as Free the Bid around female bidders, getting one female bidder into every triple bid. So that was their sort of 2015, 2016 Tour de France, tour de force. And then when I came on board, we had just gone from Free the Bid and we were going into Free the Work, which was really expanding the circle of representation. And so it wasn't just women, it was everybody who was sort of underrepresented, but that depends on where your feet are, because who's underrepresented in the US at the time is very different than who's underrepresented in India. So we really kind of had to look at it from a global perspective. And that's when I kind of came on, was about 2018, 2019, to kind of carry on that next phase of what Free the Work would be at a global standpoint. And not just in advertising and film and TV as well.
And I think that a lot of people won't, a lot of people who listen to this who aren't in the ad industry won't really understand the disparity that really existed.
It still does. To a degree. Yeah, it's gotten better. It's gotten better.
It has gotten better. It has started production companies, actively seeking out female directors for their rosters. Up until that point, even having one was an anomaly. I mean, if you count all of the production companies in the Advertising Producers Association in the UK or the Association of Independent Commercial Producers in America, you had rosters of 20 or 30 directors that didn't have a single female director on them. And when a female director was on, it was very nominal. It was very puffed.
It was one and done. We got our one. We got our one. We can't sign any others. So it was very, very much like that.
It was really only to capture one type of work. That's the other thing you guys did that I think was very important, is it was only to capture L'Oreal or some sort of female-based brand. Exactly. And they didn't treat it as, oh, this person is a good director who can pitch on anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we have evolved. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think we've evolved quite a bit since then. We helped raise the percentage of women on production company rosters by over 25%. At the time we had basically become sort of a stakeholder in the industry when it came to making sure representation behind the camera was involved. And I think what people need to understand is representation in front of the camera, especially right now, is doing quite well. We have a very diverse slate. And I don't just mean ethnicity and gender. I mean across the spectrum of orientation, disabilities, military veterans. We're doing quite well. I would say advertising is doing quite well on that front. Where we have the disparity still, and even though it's gotten better, particularly for gender and ethnicity in some parts, is behind the camera. And the reason why that matters is because it's a point of view. So when you're behind, if you're the writer of a book, if you're the painter of a painting, it's the same thing if you're behind the camera. There's going to be a very specific story that I tell. So if Orlando, you and I were going to tell a story, the way you might tell the story might be completely different than the way I tell the story. And it's just based on how we grew up and the things that we're interested in. And some of that does have to do with our demographic background, but also some of it just has to do with all the other things that tie in social economic issues, needs, concerns, also just kind of a different sensibility of how you and I might have grown up, our favorite colors, even. So I think that's why it's important for us to understand that we need a variety of folks behind the camera to showcase a variety of points of view on the same story.
Especially when you're talking about creators and the people behind the camera, you want to know that they are reaching for the reality of the culture, not just the superficial top layer that can so easily be misunderstood or and misrepresented.
We had a movie a couple years ago, I think it was Minari, where basically it was like a Korean family, Korean immigrant family trying to open and create a farm essentially in the South. And there was a bathroom scene with a big plastic bucket. And he's in the bathtub, but there's this big blue bucket next to the bathtub. And you would only know to put that there if you grew up like in a Korean family household, and that is the we always had a bucket next to our bathtub in our Korean family. So it's just like, it's those little touches. So it's like, to your point, it's like extending beyond the surface and really just seeing the details, because I'm going to read that. I'm going to clock it right away. I'm watching a movie about a Korean family and I'm clocking those little details. It's the same as if you're in the South and you've got box fans in the window. Like there's just different things, and it's not always necessarily about gender, not always necessarily about race, but there's just like regional things that we just need to be conscious of, that we would just tell a different story around. Most of the time it's not even insulting. Most of the time you just subconsciously clock it and just know it's not for you. And if we're in advertising, our whole job is to sell shit. So like, we want to make sure it's authentic and speaks to the audience that we're trying to go for. And a lot of times in advertising, we're going for big and broad. And sometimes that makes sense when you're doing like a Super Bowl commercial with those millions and millions of eyes. But in other things, you're usually trying to reach a targeted audience.
And I think that, that first step in your activism that I think you've carried on now, I think is very admirable. And having been in the industry watching that occur, it was very powerful. And I had a female director that I was really trying to develop, and it was right at the start of Free the Bid, and I was kind of trying to get it across. And I think that the tide hadn't shifted yet.
Yeah.
And
It's always like we were always 2 steps ahead.
Yeah, exactly. And, and I saw a lot of great young female directors hit their head against a wall for years and then actually crash out. I know a few of them doing incredibly well in other industries, but really that's just a loss for the industry, because they had talent and were willing to apply it in advertising, but have gone on to apply it elsewhere. But yeah, and and then you've now started Stay in LA, which
Yeah. I mean, I'm one of the lead organizers and one of the folks who helped kind of get it off the ground. I'm thankful for the other 2 partners, Ali Peshman and Sarah Dina Smith, who are both writers and directors, more on the like WGA, DGA, film, TV side of things. But yeah, we sort of all came together after the fires and just sort of realized that something needed to happen quick, because this was just another compounding post-strike, post-COVID for our industry here in Los Angeles and in California in general.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have focused on the strikes as being the pain point, but actually it was COVID before. When you consider the shock to the industry, sure, actors couldn't work, crew couldn't work. That's the very obvious one, but even management companies couldn't earn money. I mean, if nobody's getting deals done, they're not getting paid. And so the studio's obviously not earning any money. I mean, it was incredible shock. And I think it exposed the degree to which Los Angeles had taken the film industry for granted a little bit. It was, so much of the talent lives in LA. They're always going to want to shoot in LA. So, that's the way it's going to go.
We'd like to think that, but I think California in general is considered overall red tape state for a lot of different types of industries, and that's for protections of the employees and the people who live here. So I understand that. But I think over the years, because Hollywood started here, it's just become a lot of layering of bureaucratic red tape. And some of it I think is, recognized, and some of it, to your point, is sort of taken for granted. So I think what's happened now is that once everybody else in other states and other countries realize the sexiness and the profit from production shooting and commercials as well, now they're rolling out their own tax incentives, and ours hasn't been as developed or as quick to change as some of the others. So I like to say is that everybody else is rolling out our red carpet and we just keep rolling out red tape. And so that's what we're trying to do with stay in LA is try to pull back some of that tape, trying to get LA to be more focused on being a film friendly city. If we're not going to be the cheapest city to shoot in, we at least got to be the easiest. And it's insane that LA in particular is not the easiest one to shoot in because, again, Hollywood started here. So those are the certain things. I mean, we have, productions down by over 40% across the board, including commercials. And we have crew losing their homes, losing their health care. We have people in tears. I mean, and this doesn't, I'm not directly in production, but this affects my family. This affects my friends. This affects my neighborhood. This affects my schools, my home value. So, like, you can be from any part of anything in Los Angeles, and you have to come to realize that this is going to touch you in some shape or form.
Yeah, I mean, I was in Burbank the other day and there was a pastry shop just across from one of the studios and went in and they said, listen, we put money into the place after COVID, thinking like, okay, everything's going to come back and we think we're going to have to close. I mean, and I think that that's the level at which it's painful. And then it is, on some level galling to watch, I mean, Malta, 40% cash rebate back into your account within 90 days post wrap. You've got incredible tax incentives just in other states in America. You've got great tax rebates coming out of co-productions to the UK, Vancouver, all of these incredible places who are thrilled for the work, and yet LA. Can you summarize how bad is it and how far is Los Angeles lagging behind just in terms of its, I know there are two bills in the legislature. Can you just
Yeah.
give me a lay of the land?
Yeah, so the two bills in the legislature are at the state level, and what they're really there to do is modernize our tax incentives. I mean, you named a bunch of different things. So what happens, we'll talk about film and TV. So what happens on the producer side is that they are basically creating their budget and they are taking these tax incentives and essentially putting it in as part of their budget to determine where they're going to save, where they're going to where it's going to be cheapest for them to film. And so a lot of these tax incentives are guaranteed, like you said, or they're rebatables within 90 days. Ours is a lottery. So it's basically you may or you may not get it. And so when you're a producer, you can't, or business owner, just like a business owner, you can't be like, am I or am I not going to get, payment? So that doesn't
And
really
so
work.
the only people who can wait for that are the studios. And that's why usually they're the ones who end up winning it.
Yeah, and most likely if the studios are here, it's either because they've either greenlit a very, very specific LA, California based story, or you have celebrity talent, whether that's in front of the camera or behind the camera, so fancy directors or fancy actors who are not going to go and shoot for 8 months in another country and be away from their family or whatever. So most of the time, those are going to shoot here. So if they're very heavily celebrity driven, we have a better chance of keeping it here. So part of the two state bills is modernizing our tax incentive, raising it to 35%, raising the pot of money from 330 million to 750 million, also opening it up to long form competition shows. So right now you've got the show The Floor, which everyone apparently loves as a game show. It's shot in Ireland. They fly all of the contestants to Ireland, film it, and send everybody back. So that means Ireland's getting the taxi money, the coffee shop money, the dinner money, the tourist dollars,
All that great per diem.
all that great per diem. And so it's just like that's what we're trying. And when you talk about a city like Burbank, 51% of Burbank are people in the industry. That's sort of what these two tax bills are sort of going up against is opening it up to more genres, opening it up to more independent films, $1 million and over, relocating films and TV shows back to here. It's got a bigger cut. So it's just like there's all these little death by a thousand paper cuts is sort of the saying. So we're trying to reverse some of that at the state level. At the local level, we're trying to attack the permitting because it's filled with red tape, filled with you got to have 500 safety officers on set. No one really knows why they were there. They were just there from the beginning of time. So those are kind of the biggest elements that we're working on.
That red tape is really born of how much the legacy industry has been here, because every single time somebody broke a leg on a set, there is now a new safety officer who's looking out for people's legs. And then there's somebody bumps their head and there's the head safety officer. And I think that The wonderful thing is that Hollywood has seen everything, so it's prepared for anything. But we're living in a different world where cameras, are much smaller now, so that means they're less dangerous when they move at speed or around a corner or whatever else. It used to be if a camera was on a dolly and moving at speed, you could lose a finger. Actually, modern production is safer, it's quicker, it's less cumbersome, and you're right. Like LA has to respond to that in a meaningful way.
I think there's large industry things. Equipment and moves like that were never our number one issues as far as injury. More has to do with fatigue. It's like hours that we require of shooting every day, 14 hours, and then turnaround times, and then another 14 hours. So you can only imagine kind of the fatigue that sets in. And that's a whole nother set of things. And I think one of the things we need to do is don't try to boil the ocean. Really just try to start and do these small kind of things that we can kind of work on, the things we can change with city council, things we can change with the mayor, get those sort of things worked out. And then also we do have to take into effect the fact that production is changing. We do have AI coming in. It's the same thing when we went from film to digital. And then to your point, we went from large cameras to your iPhone camera. We democratized filmmaking in a lot of ways and made it very accessible for a lot of people to now be able to have the dream to do it. But with that also comes with big shifts in the organization, the process. And so besides, that's why we're trying to release the red tape as soon as possible and as quickly so that we can continue to do the production so that our folks can evolve with production as it's moving along, kind of these new landscapes that are going to be coming in.
Right. What are the primary blockers you're facing? Is it the unions? Is it just the slowness of the state legislature? I mean, you were meeting just today with Karen Bass.
We met today with Karen Bass for her press announcement, and she just kind of gave the recommitment of trying to make it easier to shoot here. Honestly, it takes a phone call from the mayor to each department. There's like 10 departments involved, so Public Works, Parks and Rec, LAPD, LAFD, et cetera, et cetera. It really takes a call to just say, hey, make this faster, make this easier. And that's one element. But then the other element is exactly what we were talking about. It's just like, hey, is this really necessary? We're not doing a Marvel shoot. We're doing an independent 6-person shoot. Can we just shoot on the sidewalk without a permit as long as it fits within the parameters? Like there's different things. Like in New York, you can shoot on the sidewalk. In LA, you can't, but we have barely anybody who walks here. So why can't we? So it's just all these tiny little bureaucratic sort of little things that pile up that we just have to undo. And I would say lots of people don't know who's supposed to undo them. Is it city council? Is it the mayor? Is it the department head? Is it the state fire chief who's requiring that certain parameters go in? You're like, I have a temporary stage. Why are we trying to do a fire code, fire alarm system? And we have a fire person on set every day. So it's just like these, well, that's what the chief of, the state of California for, the fire department says. So it's just like trying to find, it's like a hornet's nest, like trying to figure out like, okay, if I pull this thread, can I get it out?
Yeah.
It's exhausting, especially as a volunteer and as a citizen. I've learned so much about civic. I don't even I don't like, it's insane.
This is why I used the term admirable before. It doesn't sound easy or pleasant or like you're getting many pats on the back. I have seen you on the news quite a few times, but that's
Yeah. But that's just to like push the thing, and it's just like we're all volunteers. We all have day jobs. A lot of people are trying to find second jobs if they were in production. I have a full-time job launching a business. So it is, but again, it's about my value system. My value system is it doesn't matter that I'm not in production every day. It doesn't matter that I'm looking for the next production job. I know how much it affects everybody around me and the environment around me. And I know how to get shit moved. Like I know how to move shit. I know how to have conversation with legislators. I know how to assemble a team. I know how to help volunteers figure out what their purpose is and how to drive towards it and make change. So that to me is sort of that's a gift given that I need to share. And that's what's important to me is just helping this entire industry that is our economy in Los Angeles.
Yeah. Is the problem only a local one?
Oh gosh, no.
Right. Okay. Well, I'd love to hear what do you think is kind of lost in a broader cultural or industry context if production doesn't move, back or these incentives aren't done in the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we have, to me, it's almost a shame that we're dealing with this element and having to fight so hard with these elements because it's actually turned into a team sport. So if we've got all these other countries offering incentives, we as the US should be combining together to basically create a team sport of how are we making this across the board federally easier? How are we promoting to want to have filmmakers here? We're not the only filmmakers in the US. I don't know if anybody noticed, but like all of the Oscars were independent films essentially, and a whole lot of them weren't necessarily American based. And so there's amazing filmmaking coming out from other parts of the country, and we should be trying to lure them here. So it's a little bit annoying to me that we have to deal with this on such a local issue because it's taking up so much time and energy. Because the thing we really got to be looking at is how technology is changing these industries and how we are evolving our production and our crews and bringing them with us into this conversation and into these new processes. So I think what's hard is that we have a lot of people who are putting their stakes in the sand and being like, no, we're not changing, we're not moving, this is what we're doing. And that's fine. There will always be people who want to shoot on film, and God love you. If you can make, if you got the money and the cachet and the like, go for it. Seeing film, seeing yourself on film is amazing. But as we continue to evolve, we have to address technology. It's right there in the forefront. And when we look at AI so far, AI has only been a conversation about creative ownership, the creative IP of ownership. We've not really gotten into how this is becoming less and less people. I went to a news studio, a daytime news studio at a major station. There were no cameramen. There was three cameras, but there was no cameraman because there was one guy with a remote control moving the cameras at the studio. And again, it was, interview to interview, so there's not a lot of action happening there. But it also it threw me off because there was no energy in the room. There was no sizzle, no spark. It was just there. And so if more shit like that's going to happen, how are we shifting people? Where are we shifting them to? What are the opportunities? Where are the spaces that we could be looking for? And I just don't know how many people are necessarily looking at that. And I can't, I'm not necessarily one to do it, but those are the questions I have in my head.
Yeah, it seems so incredibly short-sighted, and especially because anyone who's been around the industry can see, I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. As you said, 40% down in the last couple of years. I think just Q1 2025 was 29% less film shot than the previous year, over 30% less television shot. And as you say, it's so much cheaper to fly heads of department out to Budapest, UK, Prague.
You're not even allowed to do that. Some directors, you can only bring the director or you won't qualify for their tax incentive. So you can't even bring a head of a department. You can't.
So it's
And to
not
your
only the
point,
US economy that's suffering from the lack of the overall production spend.
100% a workforce jobs issue. Forget all the studios, forget all the genres, whatever, whatever. This is a jobs. Like we need to start thinking about Hollywood and creative IP and creativity as if we were a Detroit car manufacturer. And we really haven't because we're dealing with technology, we've torn all the global fences down. And so now we're like basically can send out our creativity anywhere, which is awesome for some companies and it's awesome for people to receive it. But that being said, we need to be looking at the kind of foundations of our industry from a little bit more specific jobs point of view.
Detroit is a fascinating comp, isn't it? Because yeah, if you think of, yeah, that is a fascinating. I hadn't even really thought about it like that. That was a one industry town that was sent into the doldrums for, what, 20 years and nearly didn't recover. And as so much of that was to do with foreign manufacturing, losing a lot of the United States brain trust, and capabilities, not not upskilling as fast, not developing the industry, the physical industry fast enough. Yeah, that's fascinating because I think that one of the things that I really noticed is obviously I'm a child of the 80s and I ride around LA and I'm like, oh, that's where Axel Foley would like drove down Rodeo. And oh, that's and obviously the newer comp is like La La Land and like, the bench up at the
Once upon a time in Hollywood. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. And and I love those things, but I have nothing to compare them to now. I don't and I really noticed it when the Olympics came back after Paris and they did the performance here and they had the Red Hot Chili Peppers and they had Dre. And I did think to myself, or is this the last time LA had been relevant from an entertainment standpoint? The Dre Chili Peppers era, you know?
Well, I mean, what do we export? Tell me what we export as LA. We export fame and we export Hollywood, essentially. And then the services around those things, I would say. Those, when you're looking at, so what you saw was just our exemplary celeb culture of fame, which is all fine and dandy until they decide to go move somewhere else because of X, Y, and Z reasons. So then we just kind of have to look at Hollywood. And it's the thing that makes me sad is that the top two tourism places, because by the way, our tourism is down by over 30% now as well because of all of these things tied in together. The top two tourism places are Disneyland, which is not in LA. Not sure if people realize that. And the second is the Grove, an outdoor mall.
Really?
Yeah.
That's very
So
interesting.
we have to really start to like tie all of these things together. And I think if we start, like when we start to tie these things together, it's going to end up in itself being a workforce program, a job stimulus, honestly, because we don't show Griffith Park. We don't, when we show the beach, we do show the beach for LA, but no one can really go in it right now. So like again, we have to develop these things that will be kind of go hand in hand with what we're dealing with on the Hollywood front.
I was just driving down Melrose last Saturday, and I was like, in the 90s, when I used to walk down Melrose
Yeah.
on a Saturday, it was
Yeah.
heaving. I mean, people coming in and out, and everybody checking out all the clothes, and it was heaving with people. Same thing. I mean, you only have to look at, Venice Beach in the 80s and 90s. Like, just look at the shots they had in Baywatch. I mean, just helicopter shots down a beach that you can't see the sand. It's all just people and umbrellas and and I do think I do part of it I think is the reality of social media, which is also cannibalizing the film and television industry as well, is also keeping people inside. So like there's a lot of culture that's just not happening around LA, and then add to that the fact that people are not earning enough money because the industry's it just becomes a downward spiral quite fast.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, all of this leads back to, and people don't, I don't think people always make the leap in their mind, but they feel it, especially in their pocketbooks. This all leads back to affordable housing and universal health care. So it does not matter how many things we do, we are not going to be able to compete with a workforce in another country that has their health care covered and has affordable housing. That's just the bottom line. We live, and look, I don't, not at all trying to be political in this conversation. The bottom line is when you look at jobs and you look at infrastructure and costs, that's what it kind of comes down to.
Yeah, totally agree. It's yeah, I have thoughts on healthcare as well. I won't get into them here. That's another podcast. We could start a whole new podcast.
Yeah, and these things aren't actually political. It's just one of those things where I want people to start to see and understand like how these are all sort of tied together. And we just need to start demanding more from the people who represent us and from the companies that represent us if we're going to be able to survive in this beautiful state and then also this in a lot of parts of the country.
I also think that, on an international level, if anybody is going to be lobbying for more film and entertainment to happen in America in general, it's going to have to come from LA. I mean, everybody realizes that the heads of the studios still are the five families that, that one talks to if one's going to make a deal. And I think that there is an argument that the stuff that's happening in Atlanta, the stuff that's happening in New Mexico, I mean, I think that especially on an international level, people have looked at America a little bit as a monolith there, or a trilith or something, but there were New Yorkers, there were LA people, and there was everything in the middle. And I think that one of the good things is we are seeing, I mean, there's still the same amount of stuff shooting, so there's the same amount of people getting those
There's
jobs.
the same amount of things shooting globally. Agreed.
And but I think the good thing is we are seeing things like, when Atlanta came out, unbelievable. And we are seeing things shot in Texas now. And we are seeing, and what's nice is that you're seeing American culture be a lot more nuanced. And I do think that is a net positive, but I still think that, you're right. We shouldn't let, what has historically been the jewel of our crown die on the vine. But also I think that this is the city that's going to be lobbying for, US film at a national and international level. Yeah, and they got to lead by example.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I wish we were kind of elevating this to be more of a federal conversation. And I know that those talks are in place right now. But again, it is kind of Atlanta, Georgia. It is kind of Georgia, New York, and LA who would sort of lead this. And there's, so much rich locations and shooting happening all over the US. I mean, even the Cherokee Film Commission has incredible locations, an incredible database of folks who can work in film. So there's so much opportunity here that we just need to spend more time looking at it, promoting it, and working as a team for sure.
Right. And what are the blockers now? I mean, to the two pieces of legislation going through the legislature are SB 630 and AB 1138. It, as you say, reduces the red tape, but also takes the $350 million rebate and raises it to 750, which, to be honest, I still think feels a little low. Places like Malta, there is no cap.
Yeah. I mean, look, we have to be conscious of our economics in California, particularly right now, because we are in a deficit, including Los Angeles is in a deficit. So I think we just need to be very clear that this is not about a race to the bottom. But I agree with you about some of these things. We're doing this now. We'll see how quickly that gets tapped out. And then maybe there's another opportunity. I would say the blockers right now, there's a lot of need in California. There's a lot of need. It's the UC system. It's the instability from the federal administration that's affecting California. So there's a lot of instability amongst a lot of different industries here. And again, all these things are sort of tied together. Our tourism is down, and it's people are having to leave the state because they can't afford to be here anymore. So again, it's a multitude of things. And so when you're looking at legislators to back a bill and say yes, they have to look at $750 million and go, is that going to be the right place for me to put my vote? How does this help my constituents? And I'm in Chico Valley, and I think the thing that we have to understand, even within California, is, the last time we had a good wine country film, a proper wine country, was like, I think Keanu Reeves in like 2005 or something, or 2015, like a romantic comedy. Each one of these regions could be promoting to writers and to the film industry kind of what their settings are, what they could be doing, how great it is to shoot there. So there's all this room. But again, I think the legislators have to decide, like, is this one piece of the small pie of the whole budget worthy to save this industry or these people? How will this affect my constituency? And to be honest, when we shoot, for every dollar spent, it's a $24 economic impact. So that means it's going to the dry cleaners, the coffee shops, the florists, the caterers. So I think that people understand our part of the pie does pay for itself. And if you do dollar dollar, $1 equals $1.07. So it does pay for
Right.
itself.
Right. And I guess that, people in other parts of the state are likely gonna say, well, yeah, but are we just bailing out studios? And of course that's not the reality. You're bailing out, yeah. And you're bailing out a city that needs that stimulus, and you're bailing out the people who are going to be, on the receiving end of that. But also the legislation also has an additional bumper for shoots outside of LA, right? So if you're shooting anywhere else in the state, it's 40%, whereas shoots in LA are 35%.
Correct. So you get an uplift. So if you're shooting outside of Los Angeles. So that's definitely helpful because we do find that about 70% of production happens outside of LA City. Obviously, LA County still within that 35%, but just outside of anything outside of LA County is another 5% uplift. So I think it's just a matter of, making sure that people understand this program pays for itself, and that the people who are affected is not, it's not the 1%. It's not going to your celebrity fancy people. That's, 98% of this industry is working class, and they're middle class, and they're generational. A lot of people grow up with this business with an opportunity to get in from the ground level without necessarily having all of the degrees that you need to have and for other types of jobs.
That's a really interesting point because I think a lot of people talk about the Nepo baby phenomenon with stars and directors and things like that, which, hey, I think that there's a natural predisposition. Your parents have been very successful in one industry. It's likely that you will learn from that. They're like, I don't know how to tell you to be successful in anything else. I can only tell you how to be successful at this one thing that I've been able to figure out how to do. So, but I think you're right, that when you're talking about Stan Winston Studios, or you're talking about John Williams, or you're talking about these places, Industrial Light and Magic, you're talking about people who have been jobbing workers and craftspeople. And they've learned it from their parents, and especially in dying arts like physical matte painting and things like that. And yeah, that's a very, very good point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of this is generational. I think if we're like exactly to your point, it's like, my dad was a set dresser and I became a makeup artist or whatever it might be. I think that there's a lot of folks in that realm who are, it was supposed to be a good pension job at the end of the day. You work hard, you gig it, so it's job to job, and you prove yourself on the job every single day, so they ask you back the next day because it's never guaranteed. And you work your ass off, and now it's all just sort of falling out from underneath you. So I think, on the positive sides, I think we've seen a lot of solidarity. We had over 22,000 sign our petition, and I would say probably 80, like 70 to 80% of it was people in the industry. And then the others 20 to 30% were outside the industry. And the number one industry to sign our petition outside of being commercials, TV, or film were teachers. So again, I think these things all sort of tie into each other. And it's all just, at the end of the day, this is all community based work. So when I look at my life and what I'm doing with it, everything I've sort of reached for or intentionally gone for has been community based work, whether it's volunteering or the companies that I'm building.
And have the unions, speaking of the pensions, I mean, have the unions been a blocker or an ally in this
They
fight?
want their folks to work. I think that's the bottom line, is that they also want their folks to work. They recognize that the business is down. They have to also be conscious that some of them represent not just workers in the US in this industry, but also workers in Canada. So I think that they're very conscious of, okay, we recognize the need in this particular region or area. What can we do there, or what can we support? And then expanding it to sort of, okay, what does this look like overall?
I'm conscious of not taking up too much of your time, but I do have one question. I mean, first of all, I'll ask: is there anything we didn't cover that you think that you'd really like to make sure people understand?
No, I think on these particular topics and fronts, I think people understand. You can go to stayinla.org. You can go to California, caunited.org, which is the other organization behind Stay in LA. If you want to volunteer or donate or any of that kind of great stuff, that would be helpful. And then the only other thing I would say is look out for Mavenverse, which is the company I'm currently launching.
Great. And tell me about Mavenverse.
Mavenverse is basically standardizing and professionalizing communities, clubs, and fandoms for brand access. So that means your book clubs, your run clubs, your knitting clubs, whatever it might be, we're making them accessible for a sponsorship, in time drops. So for brand access. So really allowing brands to get in at the ground level where people are finding joy and finding joy voluntarily rather than being algorithmed too. Patreon's done a great job of what they're doing. It's sort of like Patreon and Meetup had a baby in a way. So yeah, we're a bit more ground level. And also, Patreon really focuses on the influencer and their fans. We're really focused on the communities themselves, and trying to somewhat detach from a influencer who's schlocking shit every day, who doesn't even know what things that they're selling next.
Right, gotcha. Okay, well, fantastic. Congratulations and good luck with that.
Thank you.
I do have one more question that I've been asking everybody, and it's that, the great Dan Wyden, the late great Dan Wyden, had this quote where he said, "You're useless to me unless you failed big at least twice." Can you think of, and would you be willing to admit, any time that you failed and then what you learned from it?
Yeah, I mean, you're literally, yeah, I mean, you're watching me do it right now, actually. You just happened to catch me on a day where I have been working on launching Mavenverse for, I had the idea and the inclination a few months ago. Um, and I knew that it was going to be a big and important one. And so I've been very quietly just building it and trying to launch it. And I think I made the classic mistake of letting perfection get in the way of progress. And having grown up in the advertising industry and grown up in the community business of also wanting to make sure you're being empathetic, but then also being like high design, having a high standard for things. And I think what I'm doing is I've lost time because of it. And I would say, I always expect there to be competition, but I think it's important to sort of be one of the first, out to market. And I've sort of been so mired,
Yeah,
in
yeah,
mired,
go for
yeah,
it. Free
in
form it.
all the, yeah,
Nobody here
of
is
all
going to
the,
check you.
of all the things that I haven't missed the boat, but I
Mhm.
definitely today realized the fuck up and realized
Right.
that like I'm being too precious. And also I think it's a classic kind of woman thing. Like a lot of people would stereotype where it's like women are so thoughtful and they're trying to get it to da, 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 where a lot of like men are just like, no, I just fucking launched it and just told people I know how to do it already. And so I think there's a little bit of that stereotype happening right now. And so I think for me, this is like I've had enough businesses. I've had a lot of failures. I've closed a lot of things on purpose. But I think this is like today, I'm so passionate about what I'm doing on the advocacy front. And I think I need to move some of that expediting speed and kind of grunt to my actual business because I always put myself last.
Right. Yeah, you find that actually it's the forward momentum, 20% forward momentum is better than 100% thinking it over.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of people who are supportive but want to like talk to me about it. And I'm like, I just need action people now. I need action people. I've done enough thinking. I've done enough throwing it at the fucking wall. We gotta like, I just gotta move. I have to move now. And I realized my huge mistake today. And so before and after this call, I'm scrambling to just fix it and move forward.
Yeah, somebody said to me once that it's actually a badge of honor. If you put something out and it's not perfect and people still use it, it shows that you've really solved a need
Hmm.
because they're
Okay.
willing to put up with the crapness of it. That's how important solving this need is, that you've made them, deal it, there's lag or it doesn't work or the buttons are misaligned or whatever else. And that's actually a good barometer.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've seen that happen. I've experienced that, but I guess I never put it into that perspective. And that's a great perspective to remember.
Yeah, and probably just never let yourself. You're like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea for other people. I'm gonna ship it perfect.
Well, the funny thing is, it's like I'm not like precious. I'm not a
Right.
precious person. Like I don't
Mhm.
care. Like you want to go be in that press release, go for it. Like oh, you messed up on that word with the client. I don't care. Like I'm not a precious person, and for some strange reason, I've just fucked this up today, or like fucked this up to where I haven't launched already, and I should have launched by already for all the exact reasons that we're saying. So I'm mad at myself, but it's easily correctable. And I just got to have a little bit more of my own, like this, when I'm talking to legislators, I just need to have some more of that energy.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's fantastic as well that like, doing one thing has completely shifted your thinking about another thing. It's another great example that forward momentum, no matter where it's coming from, actually begets forward momentum.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that just your values, like once you've really centered your values and understand, they kind of move through everything you do. And that's sort of like a through line that I try to always like make sure I stay tethered to.
That's fantastic. I love that. And we've never asked a question and had someone be just the other side of the fuck up. I love that. I love that we're fucking up in real time now. I love it.
Yeah, and I'm sure like other people are like, oh, it's no big deal, just like launch today and you'll be fine. But like to me, it was a huge fuck up because I consult for people. I've helped people open businesses. I've opened my own businesses. So the fact that like I just got shaken this morning so hard. I mean, there was a point where I was like, maybe I should cancel this podcast and then I was like, well, no, because I'm going to talk about Mavenverse, and that is a helpful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the moment you launch, we'll have you back on.
I mean, I launched like 5 minutes ago while we were on. No,
If you have the next hour, we can fill it with that.
great. Just go to mavenverse.com. You can sign up, be on the lookout further.
Fantastic.
Well, thank you
Well,
for
that's
having me.
amazing.
This has been lovely, and it's been lovely to reconnect with you and meet your staff. So thank you.
Absolutely. And I've just been very so impressed. I mean, from as far back as, well, I mean, obviously, Furlined, and you were always great, even before you started advocating for all the right things. But I've been exceptionally impressed with your advocacy from Free the Work to Stay in LA. I think it's incredibly admirable. I'm thrilled that you're starting something new, and just thank you for doing this. I really appreciate you giving us your time, and it's just been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Anybody can do it.
Absolutely. Well, that's the message. That's the takeaway.
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.